in this magnificent new venue. Well, I'm not actually all on my own totally. I've got Ali with me. We are broadcasting this throughout the sound is going throughout the cafe and out into the street. So you'll have a bigger audience than you think. So we've got it. We've got it going. Yeah. So we're all happy. So did that go out, that introduction? Everything I said.
Yeah.
Oh, that's okay. It's right.
Just checked it on my phone. It's definitely on.
That's okay. I don't even know whether my head is on at the moment, but it's been fantastic. Last night we had just to make you all jealous, Jaffa, this I know, and it's like, no, I'm not going to do it. But there was a great meal laid on by the Moroccans, and the Moroccan master storytellers were there with their students, and they told, and I told, and Cyril went to tell. Oh my goodness! And such a party. We've got some lovely venues, which you will see when you get here, even if you have to wait a few months or a year to get here. But you're all welcome next year. But for right now, we're having this amazing, this is actually the first one where we've got multiple people coming in on the screen. As life goes on, as the different programs occur, there will be actual people in the cafe with me. But right now, this today's program is for those people who couldn't make it for various reasons. And we're very sad that they're not here. Can we all have a mass cry? So such sadness, but such joy.
Sad.
Bringing stories from all over the place. And we had 12 newspapers cover us on Saturday from all over Africa. The first was from the Gabon. We've had television. We've got National Geographic coming here for 5 days. So it all bodes well, and the tourist industry loves us, and it bodes well for the future. So I expect this to be a dry run, and in fact, it's just a run. I'm running from one venue to another, and hopefully not dropping it. And I've got a great team working around me, and which it would have fallen apart without. So without further ado, our first person who's here in spirit, and she sent a few friends over who got here yesterday.
I bet they're drinking the spirits as we speak.
At the moment. Colin is up in the storytelling school on a conference, on a panel discussion. But right now, can you welcome, put your hands together and make lots of noise for the amazing, the fantastic Liz Weir.
Thank you, John. I'm delighted to be here. Lovely to be here. Thank you, Ali, for all your technical wizardry. I thought I'd better tell you an Irish story since I'm here in Ireland. And this is a sort of special story for me. So the story is set way back in famine times in Ireland. And there was a family called O'Connor, mother, father, little boy called Sean, who was about 5, the little baby in arms, Kathleen, or Katie as they called her. The family lived in one of those thatched cottages owned by a landlord. And like many families, they couldn't afford to pay the rent. So early one morning, the landlord's men came to evict them from the house, and they started setting fire to the roof. And the poor family were standing outside, huddled in the cold, when the mother said, wait, I have to go back. I've left something important. They said, no rent, no house. So the whole family had to make their way to the workhouse. And I'm sure you've watched programs, films like Annie, and seen what a workhouse looked like. The workhouse was a terrible place. The men were separated from their wives. The children were separated from their parents. It was grim. And within the first week or so, the little baby Kathleen took a fever and she died. And she was just buried in a mass grave with all the fever victims. And from that moment on, the poor mother got thinner and thinner. Any bloom she had in her cheeks was gone. And within a couple of months, she followed her daughter. But her husband made sure she was buried, a proper burial, in the local churchyard. Couldn't afford a headstone. But he took his little boy and he said, that's it, we're leaving Ireland. And they walked all the way up to Derry to get one of those famine ships, like many, many other people, famine ship across to the United States. And all the way across, the father was telling Sean stories, Irish stories, singing him songs, playing the tin whistle, reminding him of the life they'd had before. And when they arrived in Boston, the man, who was a good worker, got a job building the big high houses, predecessors of these big tower blocks. But he got a job on the building. And as Sean grew up and was immersed in Irish culture again, he got a job in the building trade. Generation followed generation. And then about 5 years ago, the current generation decided it was time to come back to Ireland and retrace their roots. The first place they went was to the churchyard to look for the place where the great-great-granny had been buried. And of course, they were able to find it through the church records, and they ordered a nice headstone so that she'd be remembered, properly recognised. And then the next thing they did was to go and look for the cottage. They followed the directions, and sure enough, there was an old broken down cottage, no roof, just 4 stone walls, but there was a for sale sign. They said, we're going to buy it, that's our cottage. People said, no, you can't buy that cottage. Why not? It's ours. No, it's haunted. Nobody can stay in that place. And even at night, anyone passing by can hear a baby crying. They said, it's our cottage, we're going to buy it, it's our family home. So they bought it and they renovated it like something out of The Quiet Man, whitewashed walls, thatched roof, half door, nicely painted up. And their daughter, Katie, was playing around inside the house before they moved into it. And I don't know if you know, but in Ireland, you have these huge, big fireplaces. You can actually stand inside and look up to the sky and those old cottages. And Katie had heard all the stories about it, and she knew that often there was a little hole in the wall up the fireplace inside where you'd keep, for example, salt to keep it dry. And something made her put her hand in and she found something. When she brought it out, it was an old ragged piece of cloth. When she opened it up, there was an old tin locket, you know, with a chain for around your neck. When she opened up the locket, there was a drawing of a little baby. And there was just something faint writing saying, Katie. And this was a picture of the little baby. This was what the great-great-granny had wanted back into the house for. She knew the story being handed down to her. So she took it and showed her dad, and they got it carefully wrapped up, and they buried it in the grave with the great-great-granny. Ever after that, nobody ever heard the crying baby again. And that's my story. But I want to tell you something very special about it. That's not my story. That story was devised by children I was working with in a primary school in Donegal. I've told it in American places, people believe it, and I have to tell them afterwards, no, sorry. This was devised by children who had listened to a traditional story, had taken the elements of the traditional story, I broke them up into groups, and we formulated that story between us. So if I asked any of you adults, any of you storytellers to give me a title for that story, I guarantee you wouldn't give as good a title as they gave. And the title they gave was The Chain of Memories. And that's my story. Thank you very much for the opportunity to tell. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Liz. And I'm used to being in my front room, and I'm kind of this is very much an experiment. So I apologise to you all. By Saturday, when we have the American Irish night, everything will be working. I see Ali's just decided I'm so ugly that you can't see my face, just my outline, but that's fine. That's okay. So, Liz, it's wonderful to have you here. If you disappear in the middle, you're not being rude. I'll tell this to everybody. Liz has places to be, things to do, and as Ted Jones, a great American poet, big poet, African-American big poet, used to say, I gotta read and run. And, but in Liz's case, she will read or tell and sedately move away. So, right, okay. That is just typical of what's going on in my head right now. I haven't even just. Chip, could you tell a story, please?
I could do. Yeah, sure, if you'd like me to.
So the next question is, would you tell a story?
I certainly shall. And you know what, Liz, I have done exactly the same sort of thing you've done before. I've gone into schools and I've met children, done workshops with them, and they have told fantastic stories. So I would like to share, as you have, one of these brand new age-old stories that have come out the head of someone about half my height. Which I think is the most incredible story. It took place a long, long time ago on a distant planet called Earth. And somewhere on this distant planet, there was a continent called Africa. And somewhere on that continent of Africa, there was a country. I think they now call it Morocco. And somewhere in that country, there was a very old town, which I think they now call Marrakesh. And in the middle of that town, every single being that lived there was a dragon. It was a city of dragons. And as you would expect, these dragons had sharp claws, they had huge snouts, and of course, they breathed. Well, what would you expect them to breathe? Do you know what? It's so
Fire.
annoying when people don't have their microphones on and you ask a question, isn't it? So say that again, David.
Fire.
Fire. Yes, you'd expect them to breathe fire. And well done, everybody else, for miming that so perfectly. Yes, fire. However, these dragons were almost otherwise exactly like you and me. They would go to the marketplace every single day to get their fruit and vegetables and their clothes. They had similar jobs to you and me as well. You'd see the dragon fireman, whose job would be to put out fires, because if you're a dragon, you're likely to set fire to lots of things accidentally. And they had dragon teachers to teach the little dragons how to control their fireistic tendencies, to try and make sure they didn't just set fire to everything. They had dragon zookeepers to look after the other animals that were there in the country. They had all sorts of wonderful jobs. It was a really rich culture of dragonism that they had. However, every single one of these dragons had one fear, one phobia they all had in common. That was the fear of spiders. Now, I've straight away seen Masako go back in her seat. Is there anybody else here who's a little bit nervous about spiders? Now, I've got quite a few brave faces here in the World Storytelling Cafe, but you watching this as well, you might be a little bit nervous if you see those hairy, spindly legs and all of those eyes. Why do they have so many eyes? And those big, bulbous jaws as well. I mean, if you get really, really close and see those big, bulbous jaws that are ready to shoot venom to paralyze you so that you stay alive while they suck your blood out. Oh, it's horrible, isn't it, thinking about these spiders? You can understand why these dragons were terrified of spiders, even though a dragon would be huge and they were still terrified of these spiders. And at the start of this story, right there in the middle of the marketplace, while the dragons were going about their normal business, buying their fruit, buying their vegetables, buying their clothes, there was a piercing dragon scream as one of them noticed a spider right there in the middle of the marketplace. And all of the dragons, every single one of the dragons turned around, they saw this spider, and they did a Masako. They went right back in their bodies and they were ready to run. But hold on a minute. These are dragons, aren't they? What have we already said? They can breathe what? they can breathe fire. So why should they be scared of this tiny little spider in the middle of their marketplace? They knew exactly what they needed to do. They just needed to breathe fire on it and burn it all up. That was really a simple answer, wasn't it? And you know what? I've got loads of dragons right here in the World Storytelling Cafe who have already been practicing their fire breathing. So you folks can certainly do it with me. Everybody else watching here, you can do this with me. On the count of 3, let's breathe fire on this spider. Get rid of it once and for all. 1, 2, 3. However, when the fire circled around this spider, it didn't burn and disappear like you'd maybe expect. Oh no. Instead, the spider seemed to suck up all of the flames into its body. And it began to glow and grow until it was about 10 times the size it had been before. And now the dragons were beginning to get even more nervous. I mean, now it was way too big for them to stand on. Now it was way too big for them to suck up in a vacuum cleaner. Even if vacuum cleaners had been invented, they wouldn't have been able to suck it up. They were even more terrified. They could really see clearly the eyes on this spider now. What could they do? What could they do? If they breathed fire on it now, it might get even bigger, and that would just be worse, wouldn't it? But remember how I said that these dragons had the sort of jobs that you and I have today? Well, there were dragon professors as well. And one of these dragon professors rushed to the marketplace and said, "Oh, don't worry, I've got an idea. I've got an idea. We need to blow more fire onto the spider. Honestly, this is going to save us, because if we blow more fire onto the spider, it will get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until..." What do you think is going to happen? Of course, it will get sucked up into the vacuum of space. It's the obvious answer, isn't it? So the dragons weren't entirely sure whether this was the right thing to do, but they decided to give it a go anyway. After all, they had no better plan. So dragons here in the World Storytelling Cafe, dragons wherever you are, YouTube, Facebook, wherever, get ready on the count of 3 to give me some fire. 1, 2, 3. And as before, the flames wrapped around the spider and it began to glow and grow until it was 10 times the size it had been before. Now it was almost the size of the marketplace as well. And all of the dragons were ready to run straight into the neighboring oceans. But the dragon professor counseled them to stay calm, keep trying. This would work. They just needed to have faith. They just needed to have courage. So they all kept on breathing fire. Ready, folks? On 3. 1, 2, 3. Still the flames wrapped around the spider and it began to glow and grow until now it was almost the size of Africa. Still the professor told them to keep blowing that fire. Keep blowing that fire, folks. 1, 2, 3. And as the flames wrapped around the spider, it began to glow and grow, and just as the dragon professor had said, the top of its head broke through the atmosphere, and it got sucked up into the vacuum of space, and is now floating away through the blackness there. If you've ever looked up at the stars at night, and you see some of them sort of blink a little bit, that's probably because the spider has just floated in front of those stars and is still scuttling around up there in the heavens. But as I said at the start, this story came from the head of a young man about 8 or 9 from a small school here in Cambridgeshire where I live. And isn't that just amazing? I bet you weren't expecting the story to end the way it was. In fact, I know from the look on Bob's face that he was expecting something else to happen with that spider. So huge thanks to that young man all the way in, I think it was called, I can't remember the name of the school. I know it began with G, but I really do want to thank that young man for sharing that story with me so that I could share it with you all right now. Thank you. We'll transfer that applause to wherever it goes, that little school beginning with G, somewhere out near Wisbech here in Cambridgeshire.
Thank you.
Cheerio, Liz.
Bye, Liz. Thank you, Chip. That was amazing. And thank you, that young man in the middle of Cambridgeshire. So I think we'll go from the fens across the ocean because I've just enjoyed, as you can see, I can't actually, but no, I can if I look to the side. I have enjoyed, just to prove that this is a hybrid session, and I am really in Marrakesh. And I am in Marrakesh, just to prove that I'm in a cafe, and Donna's in the waiting room waiting to come in. I have next to me Norman Perrin, all the way live and direct from Canada. And I think, I know you've just got off the plane, and I know you're completely shattered, and you're suffering from jet lag. But I was never kind to people working with me, so so we'll have our first hybrid session in so much as the Norman Perrin, all the way from Canada, is live and direct in the World Storytelling Cafe in Marrakesh. So Norman, have you got a story for us?
I think I've got a story. I've had a bit of water and mint tea, so I'm a little more alive than I've been in a while. So I want to make sure though that this microphone is live. And I do have a story. This is a story that followed me from Canada. When I left yesterday, this story packed itself into my backpack and my luggage. And well, it seems to be the right story for me to tell. Once there was a king in Africa who had a very wise and clever cook. But the cook was not only handy with herbs and sauces and making fine dishes fit for a king, he was clever as well. But one day on a whim, the king asked his cook, "Can you make me the best food there ever was?" And he waited to see what would happen. So that evening, in came a covered dish. The cover was woven of grasses, but the smells came through that woven cover. It was good. And when he lifted it up, there was a bed of rice steaming, and on top of the steaming rice, cooked to perfection, was a beef tongue. The king tasted it and says, "Indeed good. But what makes this the best food in the entire world?" "Well," said the cook, "it's a tongue. A tongue can give good advice. It can soothe a crying child. It can tell stories at the World Storytelling Cafe. A tongue is the best food in the entire world." But then, if that's the best food, said the king, "I'll give you another challenge. What's the worst food in the world?" "I can do that for you tomorrow night," said the cook. And all that next day, the king wondered what would the worst food in the world would be. Would he actually eat it? What would it smell like? And in came a dish covered with a woven grass cover, and the most delicious smells coming from that dish. And he lifted it up, and what was underneath? What do you think was underneath? There was a beef tongue, cooked to perfection. The king called his cook and said, "You said you would serve me the worst food in the world, and yet you served me exactly what you gave me last time. Explain." "Well," said the cook, "a tongue is the most difficult thing in the world. It can slander and lie and destroy and ruin reputations. A tongue can take a child and make it angry and bitter. A tongue is the most evil thing in the world. It's the worst food in the world. And the king looked at his cook and he said, "You're a very wise and clever man. Let's eat." And they did. They feasted. And now I've told you the story, and now it is for you to share the story. For the storyteller's tongue is the best food in the world.
Whoa, thank you, Norman. And really, you've actually started our hybrid journey, which hopefully will go on for centuries until, well, actually, it'll probably be about a couple of years before technology moves on and this becomes obsolete as a cassette tape player. But for now, Norman came across the Atlantic, so let's go back across the Atlantic to David Thompson in Austin. Are you still with us, David?
Oh, yeah.
Have you got a story for us, David?
Do I have a story? Shall I start?
Please start.
Okay. I need to do a little bit of an introduction to this story in that this is from the Mesoamerican cultures. We're talking about the Aztecs, the Inca, the Maya, the Olmecs, the Toltecs, the Mixtecs, and many others who have names I have not learned. This is an Aztec story. So much of history is written where the Aztecs were horrible and savage and ripping out hearts and all this other good stuff. But at the same time, I've been doing some research and have found some of the most beautiful, beautiful stories, just gorgeous. Some of you have heard this story before. Bear with me. Some of you have not. I hope you will like it. So I will be telling The Plumed Serpent and the Morning Star. It's from the Aztec. This is about how the planet Venus came into being. First, I give honor to the people who tell these stories. Brothers and sisters, welcome to my story. When Quetzalcoatl, the plumed serpent, appeared upon the earth, he gathered his people together and he taught them writing. He taught them healing. He taught them working silver and gold, feather weaving. He taught them the calendar to divide the years and the days. And he gathered them together, and together they built the great city of Tula, city of the sun. And there Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, high priest and king of his people, had his palace. And in this palace of the four walls, the east wall was all gold, hammered with beautiful designs. The west was green, covered with turquoise. The south, white, covered with silver and pearls. And the north, red, covered with bloodstones and shells. And there, Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, high priest and king of his people, sat, and all were happy. Underneath the city of Tula, underneath the palace of the four walls, rode a river, the river of good tidings. And every midnight, Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, high priest and king of his people, would go down to bathe and return and renew. So it was, my friends, for my friends you are. One day, a visitor came towards the palace, where Quetzalcoatl, high priest and king of his people, ruled with benign governance. Tezcatlipoca, he of the smoking mirror, he who carried the obsidian mirror that could show you the future, brought chaos. Tezcatlipoca, he of the smoking mirror, approached the palace doors. Go, bring your bird king here so I may show him his flesh. The guard went and said, "Oh, great one, oh, Quetzalcoatl, Lord of the people, high priest and king, plumed serpent, Tezcatlipoca, he of the smoking mirror, is at the door and demands your presence to show you your flesh." What do you mean? I do not know, grandsire. So Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, high priest and king of his people, went to the door and there met Tezcatlipoca of the smoking mirror. Here, look at your reflection and you will see exactly what you are. Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, high priest and king of his people, looked into the mirror, and there he saw a withered old man with rheumy eyes, long wispy white beard, and creases and wrinkles in his face, and he was horrified. I cannot show myself to my people. They will be frightened. I must leave. I must go to Tlapalan, the land of the red day from whence I came. Ah, Tezcatlipoca of the smoking mirror handed Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, high priest and king of his people, a vessel containing pulque, fermented maguey root. Here, drink. But what was not said was Tezcatlipoca had put in the flesh of the amanita, the magic mushroom, called flesh of the gods. Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, high priest and king of his people, took a sip and drank it down in one gulp. And there it was. He experienced mystical visions. He experienced the stars in the universe. He called to bring his sister Quetzaltetl from her home on the Nanaco, and he gave her some. And they experienced mystical visions, magic formulas. They experienced the gods, and they experienced each other. The next day, when Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, high priest and king of his people, woke, he was horrified what he had done. He said, "Oh, I must leave. I must go. But before, quick, dig a pit in the ground so I may go down and stay in darkness." And that was done. After the fourth day, Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, high priest and king of his people, came up and said, "I must go. I must go to Tlapalan, the land of the red day." And so, sending his quetzal birds, the beautiful jeweled birds, to show the way, Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, no longer king and high priest of his people, set out with his flutists and his dancers and his entourage, and together they went east towards Tlapalan, the land of the red day. They came to a place to rest. Quetzalcoatl sat beneath a tree, and as he looked at the tree, he saw that it too was aged, withered, creased like his face. And it became known as Huehuecoatitlan, the tree of old age. Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, rose and took his flutists and his dancers and his entourage with him, and together they continued toward Tlapalan, the land of the red daylight. And they came to another place to rest, and it was stones, and Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, sat on the stones, and he looked back towards Tula, his beloved city, and tears ran down his cheeks, down, etched etchings into the stone. His hands became impressions into the stone, and he became known as Temacpaco, mark of the hands. They arose again and continued and came into a land, Coapan, where the gods there approached and said, "Stop. Give to us your secrets you've given to your people. Teach us how to teach them to write, how to work gold and silver, how to do feather weaving, how to heal. Teach us. Give us those gifts." Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, freely gave them to them. He no longer had need of this. And they continued, and they stopped, for a beautiful broad river was inside them, There, Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, took off his jeweled helmet, his jeweled necklace, and tossed it into the water. And he became known as Kozka'apa, water of precious stones. And continued, they did, towards the east, towards Tlapalan, the land of the red day. And there they stopped, for a sorcerer brought forth more pulque. Here, drink, you are thirsty. Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, took the vessel and drank and fell down into a sleep from which he could not be awakened. And the next day he awoke. All was absolutely silent. And he became known as Coctan, city of sleepers. They rose, all did, and continued east on their journey. And they came to an area where there was a mountain of fire and volcano on one side. On the other side was a mountain of snow, and it came down snow and fire, snow and fire, snow and fire, and covered all that it had. Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, rose and he looked around and he saw the bodies of his flutists, the bodies of his dancers, the bodies of his entourage. He was the only one left. And so he turned and continued walking east and came to Mount Poyaotitatl, the hill of many colors, for on the other side was the ocean. And he went to the other side and he must keep going. So he called forth the serpents who came forth. They hissed and bowed in his honor and wove themselves into a raft. And upon this raft, Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, crossed the great ocean. And they came to the shore of Tlapalan, the land of the red day. And there Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, turned and dismissed the serpents over the raft, who bowed and hissed in his honor and left. And it was there, on the shore of the land of Tlapalan, the land of the red day, Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, built a great pyre of wood and debris. He threw himself on it and lit it. And the thing happened. His heart, his great heart, kept beating more and more and burst forth from his body, ascended into the heavens, escorted by the Quetzal birds, where it became Venus, the morning star, she who leads the sun from his hiding place. Some say Quetzalcoatl was not burned to ashes. They say he waits, he sleeps. So, someday, one day, this once and future king will return. Tlazocamati. Thank you.
Whoa. Thank you, David. That was fantastic. Amazing. And just to prove that we're live direct, and this is Norman sitting next to me, and it's not in virtual, we'll shake hands. And we will hold up this magic tray of biscuits. And drop microphones off the table.
Drop the mic.
And there's we will have and these biscuits appear by magical creatures, just appear out of, honestly, if you're here, and I don't want to make you jealous, but should you be in Marrakesh, magical creatures appear out of nowhere, probably from some celestial realm, and put mint tea and biscuits in front of you, and as many as you can consume. And right now, let's stop. I'm going to stop salivating, and I'm going to ask, I think I'm going to ask Dave Tom to join us. Dave, are you ready?
Hello, John. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Do you know I'm here under false pretenses because I really dropped in just to say I don't know if you're aware yet, but I am coming to Marrakesh after all. So, sort of make all these other fine
It's a secret.
Scandal.
Yeah, we wanted to be a surprise.
So I didn't want to really take up any time when anyone else.
Okay, well, in that case, just say hello.
I will just say hello. I will tell you a little bit of Norfolk folklore, just so I can say I've done something. It's Valentine's, as we all know, and here in Norfolk, but more especially in Norwich, where I come from, we have Jack Valentine, and Jack turns up at your door. There's a knock, and when you look down, when you open the door, there's a package, normally wrapped in newspaper, something like a spud gun or a catapult, or maybe some sweets or some crayons. And so I'm going to let you into a little secret, though. Well, he's not actually real. So if you want Jack Valentine to turn up at your door, someone has to do it for you. And so I'm going to shoot off in a minute and do it for my grandchildren. And then I've got a pack to come to Marrakesh. And so I just wanted to say, I'll see John and Norman soon, and I'll see you all another time. But thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your session.
Thank you, Dave. And, well, while we're on Dave, let's stay with David. David Heathfield, are you still with us?
Hello, John. Hi, Norman. Gosh, you're there.
So David, have you got a tale?
I have got a tale. I'll tell a tale. Couple of people, Liz and Chip, have told stories that children have made up with them, I love that. I'm going to tell you a story I actually learned from a student that I was teaching, an older student, a young adult student from South Korea, a number of years ago, a student called Donguk Bak. And it's a popular Korean folk tale. And it will make us all feel fresh and refreshed and alive. Well, that's the idea. Long, long, long ago, Old Man Park and Old Woman Park lived happily. Well, mostly happy. There was only one thing that was missing from their lives, and that was a child. But it was too late now. They were growing old, they were stooped, and their hair was grey, and Old Man Park's beard was long. They were both kind-hearted. And one day, as Old Man Park was gathering firewood at the edge of the forest, he found there, among the dry wood and leaves, a small bird, a sparrow with a broken wing. Old Man Park hobbled home carrying that bird gently, and he and his wife cared for the bird, fed the bird, brought water. And before long, that small sparrow was well. Mr. Park, Old Man Park, took that small sparrow back to the place where he had found it, and then said, "Fly, bird, free." But the bird fluttered and landed in the branch of a tree not far away, and then called, looked back at Old Man Park as if saying, "Follow." Old Man Park never went deep into the forest. There was too much unknown. But he trusted the bird who he had cared for, and he hobbled after the bird. It was hard. There was no path. He climbed over the roots of the trees. He held on to the branches so as not to tumble. On he went deeper and deeper and deeper into the forest, each time the bird flitting a little way ahead and landing and calling, drawing Old Man Park deeper into the forest, until finally Old Man Park found himself in a clearing, a mysterious place. There was trickling water bubbling out of the ground, a spring. And suddenly Old Man Park realized how thirsty he was. He got down onto his hands and his knees And there below the branch where the bird called, Old Man Park drank. Even his beard, his long white beard. Oh, do any of us have a long white beard? Even his beard was wet. Well, he drank and he drank, and as he drank, he felt stronger. As he drank, he felt fresher. As he drank, he felt well. And before long, he stood up, and he didn't hobble back between the trees. No, he strode back, and he waved to the bird. Wow, what water is this? Before long, he had come out of the forest, and he walked to the small cottage, and he stepped through the door, and there was Old Woman Park with her long grey hair, and she turned and, oh, who are you? I'm your husband, wife. What are you talking about? No, you are changed. Is this truly you? It is as if I have stepped back into the past. My husband, as young as the day we met. Old Man Park suddenly realized that now he had become young once more. Oh, wife, I have found the spring of youth. Wife, the bird showed me, and because of your kind heart too, you surely can become young as well. And he led Old Woman Park to the forest, but she was old and it was hard for her to walk, so he carried her. The strong young Old Man Park carried his wife through the forest. And finally, he came to that clearing, and the bird was still there, twittering in the branch above the bubbling spring. And he set his wife down, drink, wife, drink. And he watched as she drank. Her body became stronger, her back became straighter, her grey hair had a dark sheen. And when she looked up at him, her face was unwrinkled, clear, her eyes as bright as the day they had first met. And she put her lips once more to the spring, but he said, wife, stop. And she got to her feet. They thanked the bird and they skipped between the trees, hopping and jumping and was swinging from the branches. And soon they were back home and held each other in their arms, and oh, they loved each other. Well, they always loved each other, but they loved each other. And there outside, there was a knock at the door. They rose and they went, and covering themselves, they opened the door, and it was their neighbor, the hard-hearted, greedy old man. Who are you? This is my neighbor's house. We are your neighbors, Mr. and Mrs. Park. Don't you recognize us? But you're older than, they're older than, oh, he was confused. No, listen. And they told Old Man Who the story, and he believed them. Tell me where the clearing is. And being good and honest folk, Mr. Park told Old Man Who exactly how to find the spring of youth, and Old Man Who was gone. Well, the next day, Old Man Who didn't reappear, and neither the next day nor the day after, and Mr. and Mrs. Park began to wonder what had happened to him, and perhaps you already know. They set off together between the trees, skipping and laughing and sometimes running, and they came to that clearing. There, beside the spring, the bubbling spring, was a gurgling, not the gurgling of water, but yes, you know, the gurgling of a little child, a baby boy. Who? Is this you? You drank too much. And Mr. Park gathered up the small bundle of joy and passed the baby to his wife. Wife, this is the child we never had. And Who was raised again, a new life, a life anew. And do you think he grew up to be hard-hearted, selfish, greedy, and cruel? No. With loving parents, he grew up well. They had stories to tell. So a story I learned from Donguk back many years ago, and I hope you feel refreshed.
Very much. Thank
Well,
you, David.
Great telling, David. Great telling. Now, I can't see who's here, but is Masako still here?
Masako, did you call me?
Yeah, did you want to tell a story?
Sure. Sure, why not? Well, this story was going through my head, which is Japanese traditional story, which took place in a very cold day. It's not because I am jealous of you all in Marrakesh with the warm weather and blue sky and all, but anyway. So Japanese story always start with the word mukashi mukashi. That means long, long time ago. So mukashi mukashi, long time ago, there was a couple. They worked hard all day, all year, but they were very poor. They didn't mind though, because they loved each other and they were kind to each other, and every day was a good day. It was a cold, cold day, and they were enjoying Japanese cuisine that will warm your body, zosui, a Japanese risotto. Oh, wife, this is really good. Oh, husband, it's because you caught that geese. You need to add a nice soup to it. While they were enjoying, suddenly a big sound behind happened and someone fell from the ceiling. And he got up and was taking off the dust and said, I am a poverty god. And this house is so uncomfortable, I am leaving. Now, poverty god is something you do not want to have in your house, because no matter what you do, poverty stays upon you. But this couple, they were so nice. The husband said, oh, but it's a cold day. Why don't you wait until tomorrow? Oh, yeah, husband is right. Stay with us and come over here. It's nice, zosui. That part of you two, I do not like. I can't stand it anymore. You two are too kind. I'm leaving. And he stormed off. But right before he went by the door, he said, turn around, and he said, go to the lone pine tree on a main tree at 10 p.m. And then he was gone. The couple was puzzled of what he said, but after all, it was what God said. So they decided to go to the pine tree at 10 p.m. And then when they got there, they were astonished and amazed, because as far as they could see, the road was covered with horse droppings. They got a bit scared and they turned and started to run home. But then afterwards, husband said, wait, wife. What is it, husband? The farmer come during the day today looking for manure. Yes, there was. Farmer did come. And didn't he say the horse manure is the best? Yes, he did. And they realized that all those droppings can turn into gold. So they got busy, they got things to put the droppings in, and they went back and forth. It took them till morning, but they had a big smile on their face. They had a mountain of horse droppings. And then the farmer came, and he had big smile as well, and he gave them plenty of gold coins. So the couple had lived happily ever after without poverty god. Actually, the end.
Beautiful. Thank you, Masako.
Well, that was beautiful, beautiful.
I'm not envious. Enjoy Marrakesh.
No, actually, it's really cold here and
Really?
no one feeds us and no one's coming to the festival and you might as well stay at home. No,
I don't trust you. I don't believe you. But have a great festival, John and David.
and everyone else, we are going to run this festival next year. We expected it to be a dry run, but it's been going so well and we've been so welcomed that I think they're coming to find us and probably string us up if we didn't run the festival next year. So,
Brilliant. Looking forward to next year then, John.
yeah. So thank you. And thank you, Masaka. And Rona, actually, before we go to Rona, I want to go back. I'm trying to get around the world in the spirit of the World Storytelling Cafe. So I think we can go back across the Atlantic because I know Bob and Liz Pennegas are sitting in New Mexico. And I don't know it's probably quite warm in New Mexico at the moment. Are you still with us, Bob?
I'm here, and we have snow in the backyard, so it's not that warm. It got down to 5 Fahrenheit not too recently.
Kind of it was a lot colder than usual. So
Yeah.
but Bob, have you got Liz with you as well?
Liz sends her regret she had to go off to work this morning, but she'll be with us on Saturday for the.
Bob, you can represent both. Have you got a story for us, Bob?
Well, I do. When I thought that we were going to be able to be there in Marrakesh in person, I wanted to find a story of hospitality to be the first story that I would tell, and then watching the tea being poured and the biscuits there, I think, yeah, telling a story of hospitality, and feeling the warmth of the hospitality there in Marrakesh. This is the story I want to tell. So many years ago, I was a deckhand on a boat in Alaska, a fishing boat. Unfortunately, the skipper was a raging racist and anti-Semite. So I had to bail. I had to get off in a hurry, and I got off at a small fishing village in southeast Alaska. I had about $2 in my pocket. I spent that night in an old abandoned warehouse. The next morning, I went into the little local cafe, and I was telling the person next to me sort of my tale of woe. He said, "It's halibut season. Why don't you go out to the small native village of Cake, Alaska? Maybe you can get on a halibut fishing boat." People were listening. The other men at the counter were listening to this, and they began to warn me, "Don't go out there. Don't go out there. You're not from this culture. They're going to throw you overboard. You're going to feed the sandworms." And luckily, I paid absolutely no attention to that. I went out to Cake, Alaska, and was treated to the most amazing hospitality that you can imagine. I was one of only 2 or 3 non-natives in the entire village. I was taken in by a family who cooked dinner and invited me for 2 weeks. I stayed on their boat until they helped find me a job on a fishing boat, and my adventures in Alaska went from there. Now, that preface to the story is important because years and years later, I heard the story that I'm going to tell you now. It took me more years later, to find out that this story was told, and I believe is still told, in Tlingit villages. And I thought about whether I would tell this Native American tale, but I have such a personal connection to it that I feel that it's appropriate. I asked for permission, and I was told, tell it when if you feel it's appropriate. So, a long time ago, there was a man of the Raven clan who had lived many, many, many years. So many, in fact, that because of sickness, accident, death, most of his friends and family had passed before him. He was lonely. He was heartbroken. And yes, so heartbroken that he actually thought about ending his life. And on this day, that man walked deep into the forest, deep into the deepest part of the forest where he hadn't been before. And as he approached a small stream that was coming out of the mountains, he noticed hot, steaming piles of bear scat, full of, it was the season of the salmon coming up the creeks. He saw salmon with their bellies ripped out, sure sign that bears had been feeding there. There were berries still steaming in the scat, and he thought, "Oh, I'm close to a bear trail, a grizzly bear trail. Maybe I will just lie down here and let the bears come and take me." And so that's what he did. He lay down in that deep forest, shut his eyes. He could hear the ravens cawing from the tops of the trees. He could hear the creek gurgling. And then he began to hear the snapping of twigs and the breaking of branches. He looked up, he opened his eyes, he looked up, and coming down from the hill were 7 grizzly bears. In the front was a large old silvertip. Silvertip is what you would call bears like us. Our hair gets gray, and bears' hair gets gray as well. At the back of the procession of the bears was a smaller bear, maybe a 2-year-old, much smaller than old Silvertip. They were coming right for him. And as they approached, and as he heard the sound of those breaking branches, he began to imagine the sound and the feeling of his bones being broken. Suddenly, the idea of letting the bears take his life did not seem like such a good idea. And at the very last moment, he stood up. And at the very moment that he stood up, old Silvertip stood up, tall, towering over him. And the man spoke. He said, he told his story. He told what I've told you so far about his loneliness, about the passing of his relatives and his friends. And he said, I was thinking to let you eat me, but now would you come to my village and let me treat you to a feast? The bear looked right in his eyes and roared, and slowly nodded its head. I think he has accepted my invitation, man thought. Silvertip turned around and walked back up the hill from where he came, followed by the other 6 bears. That man rushed now back to his village in a state of great excitement. He told the villagers what had happened. He invited them to the feast. But the villagers looked at him and said, "You did a very, very foolish thing. You invited our enemies to this feast. We are not coming." Now, the man made preparations for the bears. He did what we would do. He made his house look good. He swept the ashes from the fire. And now he began to gather the things that bears like to eat. Venison, fresh salmon, smoked salmon, berries of all kinds. Even beach greens, because bears like to eat greens as well. And now he was ready. Just before the appointed time for the bears to come, he took berries and mixed them with fish oil and made a paint, and he painted himself ceremoniously to honor the bear's presence. The bears, at the appointed time, came down the hill towards the village. Now, the villagers who did not come to the feast were curious. They were hiding behind the posts of their house to see what would happen. And now the bears entered their host's house. They sat themselves in a circle, and the feast began. The man would bring out berries. He handed a plate of berries to Silvertip. Silvertip took some of the berries, put them on his paw, ate the berries, passed the berries around the circle of bears, and the feast continued long into that day. The berries were shared, the venison, the smoked salmon, the fresh salmon, the greens. And when the food was finished, Silvertip stood up to his full height and began to speak. Now he was grunting and speaking in a language, of course, that the man did not understand. But what he did understand was that Silvertip was thanking him for the feast. And at the end of the Silvertip's oration, he went to the man and licked some of that ceremonial berry juice, paint, from his body. And each of the other bears did so in turn, and then they left and went back up into the mountains from where they came. It was a day later when there was a knock at the man's house. He opened the door, and there was a creature. It mostly looked like a bear, but now it had an almost human face. I am the small bear that was at the feast yesterday, and Silvertip has sent me to ask you if he understood, if you understood what he was telling you. You see, I'm a bear child now. I was a human once, but the bears took me in. I was lost in the woods, and now mostly I am a bear, but for important occasions I can speak with you. So again he asked, did you understand what Silvertip said to you? And the man said, well, I didn't understand too much, but I knew that he was thanking me. Yes, he was thanking you, but he also wanted you to know that he understood you. He too is very old. He too has lost members of his family. The bears know love and kindness and loss as you do. Our condition is the same. Silvertip wants you to know that the bears and the people do not need to be enemies. We share the forest. There is enough food, berries, fish, venison for us all. And finally, Silvertip wants you to remember him. Remember him when you are feeling sad and lonely. And with that, the bear man, the bear child, went back up to his home in the woods. So when I researched this story and finally found a written source, which went back to the late 1890s, I learned that this story was told by a man in the village of Cake, that place where I had received such incredible hospitality. And Kasank said of this story, from this story, we learned not only to live with the bears, but we learned that sometimes it is good to sit down with those who you do not know, even an enemy, because you may become friends over a meal, just as the people became friends with the bears. And that's the story of the man who entertained the bears. Thanks, everybody. And
We're missing you.
everybody, please, I know you are. Sad not to be there. Liz and I are both sad, but we are very, very happy for everyone who is there, and have a marvelous time.
Undoubtedly, we will see you in Marrakesh sometime, when at an easier time for everybody. But that's actually, that's a perfect story for Marrakesh, because it is the city of hospitality. It is amazing. Okay, well, let's cross back across the Atlantic, and Rona, have you got a story for us?
Yes, I have, John. Good to see you.
And lovely to see you. And could you tell us the story?
I will. I'll tell you a story. We've had about dragons and we've had about bears and all sorts of things. I'd like to tell you about mermaids. Well, mermaids. Really? Do they exist? Are they a myth? Well, let me tell you what I know about them. If I asked you to describe a mermaid now, I'm sure I know what you would say. You would tell me that she was a delicate creature. Long golden or red hair, huge green eyes, beautiful face, always smiling. Hourglass top half to her figure, wearing a little shell bra, and then a long, absolutely incredible tail, holding every colour under the sun. Yes, that's what you and probably half the children on the planet would tell me. Well, that's a lie. That's Walt Disney's version of The Little Mermaid, and well told by him to dispel the fears of the children who actually knew what was under the water and were terrified of it. If I asked you to take that pretty little mermaid and put her in the North Sea, she wouldn't last 5 minutes because it's freezing cold. It's bitterly cold. And everything there is grey. There is no colour in the North Sea. I know, because I've been there. Even the fish, you wouldn't even find a goldfish in the North Sea. They're all grey. Actually, 50 shades of grey. Yes, steel grey. And in amongst them, you might find a creature swimming there that we know as the real she-mare. And she is incredible. She's got a face like a fish, but with a human look. Her arms are always flailing about. Her teeth are so big that she can't even close her mouth. And she and her sisters will climb onto the rocks and lure the fishermen and the sailors with wonderful songs. And the sailors will draw near, and then they will be shipwrecked on the rocks. And she and her sisters will then pillage and take everything that's there. And then the final act, despicable act, they will eat the sailors or the fishermen, throwing their bones back into the sea. And how do I know that this is true? Because I told you, I was there. I had always been warned, do not go near the sea. Go to the coastline, play on the sand, but always stay a few feet back from the tide line. But of course, as children will, they disobey their parents, and we often paddled in the sea, not too far in, maybe up to our knees. But one day I was particularly brave because on that particular day, the water was just freezing, not below freezing, and I could cope with that. Splashed around. Suddenly, waist deep, I slipped and fell. And as I fell and looked into the water ahead of me, what I saw coming towards me terrified me then and still does to this day. That head of a fish coming towards me, the arms flailing at her sides. She spotted me and she was after me. I turned and I swam the fastest I have ever swum in my life. I was only 7 years old. I was out of that water like a shot. Well, almost all of me was out of that water because that siren clipped my little toe on my right foot and I bled into the North Sea. So my blood is still there and she's still looking for me. So I can assure you, I will never, ever go back into the North Sea again. I prefer to see the image of Walt Disney's Little Mermaid. Okay.
Rhoda, as always, and you will get out here. Now, I've been joined, actually, I feel like I'm like one of those television things where now I've been joined live and direct at the cafe, but complete with his mint tea, which is compulsory when entering a room. The amazing, the fantastic Babasi, and we're hoping we'll get a few more people up into, but they can hear what's going on anyway. So that's so yeah, no, I'm with David. That was wonderful, Rona. So without further ado, I'm going to switch on this microphone, and I'm going to pass it to the Honourable Babasi, and the Honourable Babasi will talk to me and to you.
You know, I'm convinced.
He's not so honorable, but anyway, hey, cuz.
Oh, don't start with me, David.
You know, I know.
I know what's in your closet. I love David like a brother. And I'm convinced that John Noe and I are brothers. We may look different, be from different countries, different cultures, but our storyteller hearts and souls are just as it is with you, David, and the many other storytellers that are on the World Storytelling Cafe.com connections. I'm in Morocco. I'm in Marrakesh, Morocco. I woke up for my second day in Marrakesh, Morocco. Now, for those who are going to understand the significance of that, getting here was an adventure. Many thanks to Mark Jamoke Perkins, one of my sons, who looked at me one day and said, "You are so going to Morocco. You're going." He set up a GoFundMe, and we're here. So I'm glad about that. The World Storytelling Cafe.com is a very special place indeed. It has brought together storytellers and audiences from the four corners of around the earth. And we literally have heard from people from all over the globe, from Asia, Australia, Ireland, Scotland, other parts of Great Britain, Colombia, South America. I met two incredible youth from Colombia, Julia and Julian, and they're just incredible. They inspire me. I've also met people from Canada, and I think that's Norman, And I've met people from other storytellers from Washington, D.C., from the United States of America. Dave Thompson, he and I have a friendly banter about each other, but there's utmost respect. Then there is Babe Prince. I call him the bad end Prince. You know, from the United Kingdom. I mean, there are people. I could take up a whole hour just mentioning the people that I already knew from the World Storytelling Cafe, .com, Zoom Adventures, but there's also the people I've met in America. You know that old expression that says, "I've come home." From the moment I stepped foot on Marrakesh soil, I have been home. I now have 5 new sons, and that's going to cause a little bit of questioning when I get back to Washington, D.C., because I got 5 new sons and none of them under 20. And they're going to say, "Barbara, you only gone for a week. How did you get 5 new sons?" But I've seen family and relatives. That's for family and relatives. The resemblance is just that strong. So I'm having a great time. I'm meeting new people, learning new stories, finding out the ways of the people in Marrakesh. I'm in the Medina, and that's a very historical part of Marrakesh. And not only that, they don't allow cars in the Medina. But they have motorcycles, motorbikes, bicycles, donkey carts. Whoa. You know, and the streets are very narrow. The average American car could not, if they were allowed, could not get down these streets of the Medina. So it's been a learning experience. It's been a lovely experience. Star Riyadh, where I'm staying, where Jamoke and I are staying, I think it's better than any hotel we could have picked out. The staff has been very wonderful, very caring. I'm vegetarian. Everyone's chilling to my needs. I think John's waiting for me to tell a story. I've just been doing some color commentary while he was taking care of something else. And I think I just saw Mr. Hartfield, you know, and there's keeping. Okay, I'm gonna tell a story. And this story took place a long time ago, when animals could talk. Oh yes, at one time animals could talk. Yes, they could. Now you see, this story is about an aunt, not an uncle, but an aunt. And this aunt was minding her business, walking along, having a good old time. La 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 la. When he came across an incredible, humongous crumb. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, it's no big deal for crumb. It was, you know, crumb is tiny to us. But to that ant, that was enough food to last a month. And the ant went up and he licked the crumb. Oh, it's delicious. I want to take this crumb back to my Kijiji, that means village, and share. But the ant went to push the crumb. He pushed, and he pushed, and he pushed. But the crumb would not move. So he pulled, and he pulled, and he pulled. But the crumb would not move. He pushed, he pulled, he pushed, he pulled. But that crumb wasn't going anywhere. Just then, his bestest friend, his BFF, the whole wide world happened to be coming along. And his bestest friend was Brother Grasshopper. He said, "Si jambo, Brother Grasshopper." That's in Swahili. And Grasshopper said, "Si jambo, Brother Ant." He said, "Hey, you see this great big crumb? It is so big and delicious. I want to take it back to my Kijiji and share. But it is too big for me to move by myself. Would you help me move it?" Brother Grasshopper looked at his bestest friend in the whole wide world like he just lost his mind. He said, "They call I Grasshopper, because I hop through tall grass. They don't call I crumb pusher. You want I, Brother Grasshopper, to help you push crumb? Nah, you short today, my friend." And with that, he hopped away. The ant was not happy. His bestest friend in the whole wide world had just denied him assistance. So he went to push the crumb. The crumb would not move. He went to pull the crumb. The crumb would not move. He went to push, to pull, to push, to pull. That crumb wasn't going anywhere. Just then, he heard a noise up in the trees, and a great big eagle landed on a branch. He said, "Hello, Sister Eagle." She looked to her left. She looked to her right. She didn't see anybody. No, down here, Sister Eagle. She looked way down and she saw her brother ant, a little tiny duck. She said, "Oh, hello, little man." He said, yeah. Look, you see this great big crumb? It is so big and delicious. I want to take it back to my kijiji, that means village, and share. But it is too big for me to move. Would you help me? Sister Eagle had attitude. I am queen of the sky. And you want me, queen of the sky, to help you push a crumb? Little man, have you lost your mind? Not happening. And with that, she flew away. Well, now Brother Ant was ticked off. His best friend wouldn't help him, and Queen of the Sky wouldn't help him, and all she had to do was take the tip of one of her talons and move the crumb. So he got mad and got ready to rush the crumb. But before he could push that crumb again, a non-city spider, and in parts of Africa, spiders can grow bigger than Bombasse's hand, but it's still small compared to the giraffe, and it's still small compared to the gorilla. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You say the word is gorilla. But if I saw anything that big and ugly coming after me, I'd go real fast to get away from it. Well, a Nazi spider came down. He said, "Hey, why are you making all this noise, Mom? Don't you know I'm up in the trees sleeping? I was up all night sleeping. This morning I woke up tired from sleeping all night. So I had to take me a nap to recover from sleeping. Then I had to take a nap to recover from the nap that I had to take from sleeping. Now I'm up in the tree taking a nap to recover from the nap, to recover from the nap, to recover from sleeping all night long. Get down here making all this noise. Any fool can see that there's a great big crumb, but I only have your word that is delicious." And with that, a non-human spider took a bite of crumb. And it took another bite of crumb. And it took a third bite of crumb. "Oh, man, you know that crumb. It is delicious. But don't be asking me to help you move this crumb, man. I've already done my part. I made your load lighter. Now go away. Go away. I'm going to go back up in my tree and take a nap to recover from the nap that I had to take to recover from the nap, to recover from the nap, to recover from sleeping all night long. Go away." Brother Ant was not happy. He was angry. He was angry. He was so angry. In fact, he was hangry. He was hungry and angry. And he rushed the crumb and he went to push the crumb, and the crumb moved. So he pushed the crumb some more and the crumb moved. And he pushed and pushed. He was pushing. He was pushing. He was pushing the crumb. He was doing it and doing it and doing it well. He was doing it and doing it and doing it well. And he pushed the crumb all the way back to his kijiji. That means village. When he got there, all the people in the village, they looked at this great big crumb. They all went, "Whoa, what a great big crumb, 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 crumb." The musicians came out and they started musician. Wait a minute, that's not a word. The musicians came out and they started playing the drums and the kora and other instruments. And the people came out and saw this great big crumb. And Brother Ant said, "Help yourself, help yourself." And people began to take bits of crumb. It's delicious, it's delicious, and nutritious, it's delicious. And they started eating the crumb. They started dancing. They were dancing in the street, and they were dancing, and they were having a good time. And they were eating the crumb, and the musicians played the drums and the kora and the flute and other instruments. Oh, and the shakere. And they were having a good time because they were having a party. A party is what you go to. A party is what you are. Oh, man. They partied until all the crumb was gone. The musicians were too tired to play another song. The dancers were too tired to do another dance. And they all sat down, overcome with the itis. And they looked at Brother Aunt and they said, Asante Sana, Brother Aunt. Thank you very much, Brother Aunt. That crumb, that great big crumb that you brought to our village, that means Kijiji, was so delicious. You did us proud. Now, I am a griot. Some people say griot. I'm not going to argue about that. I will tell you that griot is not French. If you look up storyteller in a French dictionary, you're not going to see griot. You're not going to see griot. But I teach with the stories I tell. So listen closely to this lesson. You see, sometimes in life, things seem too large. Maybe they want too much from you from work. Maybe the homework assignment is too much for the student. Maybe the little ones think the chores are unfair. Maybe your lady friend doesn't like you that much. Maybe your male friend doesn't like you that much. Maybe you don't get mail. That's a bad joke. But you see, in life, you never know what you can do until you simply do it. My name is Baba C. I'm in Marrakesh, Morocco, celebrating the first Marrakesh International Storytelling Festival. And I'm about to turn the mic back over to the one, the only, John Roll.
Well, as you couldn't be here, we are, Baba C, that was amazing.
Thank you.
That's magic. Can we have a huge round of applause? People downstairs, please, can you give a round of applause to Baba C? You've all heard what I've been saying. And because this is hybrid, and because you are sitting out there in the world and wanting to see what's happening, I'm bringing on all the way from Colombia, sitting in Marrakesh, broadcasting to the world, the phenomenal Juliana Marin. And could you vacate the chair so we can put Juliana on there? I hate to do this to you.
They're booting me out. Yeah, I can.
Yeah.
It's gonna take a little moment because I'm having an issue.
It's not a big problem. It's not for me, but it is for him.
No, I get it. Thank you.
Right. So,
My legs are saying things I can't repeat. Thank you. Yes.
okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Baba C.
Well, now, Juliana,
Sure.
how have you found the festival so far?
Oh, fantastic. It's right out of the Arabian Nights. I feel like I'm in a story.
Because we're trying to make everyone out there in Zoomland jealous, so jealous that they're going to come next year to the second festival. Or alternatively, they're going to immediately leap on a plane and rush over to Marrakesh, World Storytelling Cafe and the Storytelling School and all those wonderful venues we have. But right now, I'm going to stop rattling on. We're going to go. I know you out there have been wanting to see some of the tellers that are sitting here. And this is one of our wonderful international tellers, Juliana Marin. And actually, she didn't come by herself. Could you come over and be in front of the screen? Because people need to see. Yeah, let Yanina in. This is Zoomland, so we have to work live and so. Okay. Yanina's waiting to come in. So just so you can be seen, oh, that's perfect. That's perfect. So you're just going to look beautiful. You have to just say hello.
Hello.
You can say hello in Spanish, just to prove that we are international.
Hola, mucho gusto. Mi nombre es Julián, estoy aquí en el festival en Marruecos. Un placer y un honor estar con ustedes. Muchas gracias.
Sorry about that.
Take two.
Hola, mucho gusto. Mi nombre es Julián. Venimos de Colombia. Mi amiga Juliana y yo. Y es un gusto estar acá. Es un honor para mí compartir con ustedes este festival. Y bueno, espero disfrutemos todos mucho de esta agradable compañía. Muchas gracias.
Okay, now, Juliana, you're a storyteller.
Yes, sir.
You travel all over the world telling stories. You're, in fact, a traveling storyteller, a rare breed these days. And so we're so glad you're back on the road. So would you give us a story?
Well, it seems strange to me that today is Valentine's Day. Nobody has mentioned it, and I haven't heard a single love story. So I'm going to tell a story that I picked up on the road while I was traveling. And I was in Romania a few years ago, and I was telling a story to someone on the street because that's how I travel. I generally have a sign or a flag that says "Traveling Storyteller from Colombia," and I come up to some unsuspecting people in an unexpected place, and I say, "I have come from all the way, the other side of the world, to tell you a story. Would you like to hear it?" Depending on the culture, more often than not, they'll say yes. But this time in Romania, I had a fantastic, amazing experience because the woman actually said, after she heard my story, she said, "I actually have a story for you. Would you like to hear it?" In order to be a storyteller, you must first become a story listener. And so I said, "Of course." And she said that she found this story handwritten in her mother's journal after her mother's death. And she doesn't know where the story came from. It's a story about a young prince who, yes, he was a prince, but he was just a young man after all. And he wanted to know the world. Now, this is a long time ago when in Romania, princes still lived in castles at the top of a hill and the city was down at the bottom. And this young prince, he had never known anything out beyond the palace. He'd always been treated in luxury, but he knew within him that there was something that he was missing. Because everything he'd always lived was fake, and he wanted something real. And so he asked to be taken to the city, to be shown the streets, and to come face to face with poverty. He had heard of it, of course, but he'd never seen it for himself. And they tried to dissuade him, but he was quite insistent. So for his 16th birthday, he was finally given an entourage with the best bodyguards and all the servants, and he was paraded through the narrow streets. But that wasn't real either. There were people coming from all over, trying to grab onto him, begging for alms. And it was terrible, you know, it was worse than he expected. But as he was about to say, "Forget this, let's go back to the palace and I'll keep living the way I always have," he heard something. He heard music. Now, of course, all his life he had been serenaded by the best musicians, but he had never heard something like this before. A clear, sweet, pure voice coming from deep within the labyrinth of the cobblestone streets and the narrow walls. And he said, "Let's go there. Who is singing right now? I must hire them for the palace." And so all the horses and all the guards and everyone turned in through the streets, and instantly the city was stopped. And he searched around, but all he saw was piles of garbage. And finally disappointed, he went back to the palace. But that song stayed inside of him, so much that he knew he had to go back and find it. And finally, being rather rebellious as 16-year-olds tend to be, he snuck away from the palace in the middle of the night, wearing, of course, clothes that he found somewhere. And someone needs to be muted. It's coming over loud. Does anyone know? Sorry, I know there is having some difficulties with the sound. Can everyone still hear me? All right, I'll keep telling the story, and then everyone please put in the comments. There's live background noise or feedback.
That's what it is.
The background noise. Okay. All right.
I have a suggestion. I think it may be people downstairs who are making the noise. I wonder if somebody could ask them if they could be a little bit more quiet or close the door or something.
And Lucy, there's a radio interview going on downstairs as well at the moment. So.
Okay. Is it possible to close the door?
Or even throw a bucket of water over them.
Oh, that's a good idea. I like that idea. Is it possible to close the door?
No, probably not.
No. Okay. All right. Oh, can you turn the volume up on the mics?
Lloyd, just I'll leave Alexa do one thing at a time. It's
They're addressing it now.
they're working on it.
Great.
I think it would have been better to carry on with the rhythm of the story.
Sorry, Dylan.
Okay. Are we ready?
Yeah.
So, where were we in the story?
We were at the point where the prince was sneaking out in the evening. I was wrong. I said it was the middle of the night, but no, it wasn't the middle of the night because he knew that whoever was singing would probably be asleep. He snuck out in the evening when everyone was busiest and would be least missed and disappear among the crowds, and he went back, finding his way through the narrow streets and guiding himself by the sound, by that voice that was so pure and beautiful. And he rounded the corner all by himself, creeping quietly. And it was the same pile of garbage, but the pile of garbage was the one that was singing. And he crept up a little bit closer and saw that actually it was a girl, a young girl. She was probably about his same age, maybe a little bit younger. She was a beggar girl, sitting in this pile of garbage, dressed in rags, and her eyes were closed. And she had a little bowl in front of her with a few little coins in it. As she sang, she was smiling, as if she was singing from deep inside her heart, from her soul. And he just stood there listening, and yes, she was, after all, a beggar, but he fell madly, head over heels in love. He didn't see her as a beggar, he saw her as a queen that he wished to earn. Now, since he was the prince, he could have just told her, I'm going to make you the princess and you can come to the palace and change your life. But no. He was young, he wasn't very experienced in the ways of woman, but he had heard the stories and he wanted to win her heart. He wanted her to love him for who he was. And he wanted to give her something, but you don't just give alms to a queen. You don't drop a coin in the bowl. No, he needed a gift that would make her fall in love, a gift that was worthy of a queen, a gift that would show her, tell her that she was so valuable, that she was priceless. And so when her song finished and she started to open her eyes, well, he was, after all, young and inexperienced in the ways of women, and he turned red and raced away because he didn't know how to act or what to say. But all that night, he couldn't sleep thinking about what to give her, what beautiful, romantic gift and gesture. And, well, generally people give flowers, right? But, he knew. He first thought of fancy gold embroidered dresses or something like that, but no, that was too, it wasn't special enough, it wasn't unique, it wasn't romantic. He wanted something that would really show that he loved her. And flowers, well, those have been used by men to woo women for the longest of times. So it had to be a flower, but it couldn't be just any flower. He needed a priceless flower, a flower worthy of a queen. And when he was very little, his mother, the queen, had received one such flower, a flower that came from exotic, faraway lands, from the jungle, one whose fragrance filled the entire palace for days. An orchid. Orchids were not seen in those lands. You had to send for them from far away, and it was much more expensive than the fine horses or the jeweled dresses or the treasures that he was thinking of first. And when he finally got it, he put it in a simple, undecorated wooden box, and he snuck back out in the evening when everything was busiest and he would at least be missed. And he crept up to her, placed the wooden box. She was still singing with her eyes closed. And she heard the sound and she opened her eyes, but he was young and inexperienced in the ways of women. He had already disappeared around the corner because he still didn't know what to say, right? He was already planning what would his second gift be and his third, and oh, how little by little he would win her over. And the girl opened her eyes and looked around. There were no more coins in her bowl, but there was this box. And rather afraid, not knowing if some of the cruel boys had left her another dead rat, she carefully opened it. Fragrance of this magical flower that she had never seen before in her life, of this orchid. It filled the streets, overpowering the scent of garbage and instead lending a perfume, making her feel like as if she were in a palace. And the smell went in through her nostrils and straight down to her heart. And she felt hope. Hope, because she knew that somewhere out there, someone really, truly loved her. And that night, the beggar girl, lying in her pile of garbage, but clutching the orchid close to her heart and happy for the first time in her life, that night, the girl died of hunger.
So we are now very live and very direct at the cafe. There's more and more people piling in. In a second, we're going to start Moroccan evening downstairs, but it would be remiss of me not to bring on as our final teller for this hybrid, for our first hybrid show, which is, and we're fighting it all the time, and technical stuff and bits and pieces, but we had the inspiration from the Moroccan side, if you like, or just 1/3 of the inspiration, or quarter of the inspiration for this festival. Lucy, of course, is the original inspiration. Mike is the inspiration. I've had a little bit to do with it, but here next to me is the phenomenal Zuhair. Zuhair, could you say a little about the festival and then give us a story?
All right, it's hard to stay humble after such an introduction. So, as an amazing person, I will give you an amazing speech and, of course, an amazing story. So, thank you so much for our online audience for following up with the festival. And just to let you know that you are missing a lot of fun here in Marrakesh, and hopefully next year you will be here with us. So, just to give you a glimpse of what we are doing, I'll be telling you an amazing story that I already told you before, I guess. Some of you might be familiar with the story, but you don't have heard the story before, but it's always good to actually remember the story. Once upon a long time ago, of course, there lived a merchant, and this merchant was very rich, a lot of business going on. And he had a man working for him. He was a shepherd, taking care of his sheep, his cows, and this man spends all the day on top of a mountain, from sunrise to sunset. And one day, our shepherd, as he grew tired, he sat under the shade of a tree, eating some dates and sipping some water and milk. And all of a sudden, there she is coming, a beautiful girl, looking like a princess, dressed like a princess, with a lot of jewels around her neck. He started asking questions. He thought, why is she here? What she's doing here? She's coming out of a very dangerous forest, dressed like that. Is she a genie? And then as he was having all these thoughts in his mind, she approached him and said very gently, "Salam alaikum, sir." He stood up, fixing his old, torn, dirty jalab and said, "Wa alaikum salam, beautiful lady. How can I serve?" She told him, "What are you doing here?" I told her, "Well, I must be the one asking you that. I'm a shepherd. I look like a shepherd, but you look like a princess coming out of a very dangerous forest. She told him, I have a question for you. He said, yes. She told him, would you marry me? He said, yeah, of course I will. Of course I will marry you. But first, we need to go back to the city so I can take my money from the merchant and we can start a happy family together. Oh, I look at myself in the camera. I'm so amazing. Looking cute. Thank you, Christian. So carrying on with the story. So they went back to the city. The merchant looked at the shepherd coming back. It's just midday. It's too early for him to come back. So he walked towards him and he told him, why are you back? It's early for you to be back. I told him, well, I have some news for you. I'm not going to be working for you anymore. Actually, I'm quitting because I'm getting married. Married, the rich merchant said. And he told him, yes, I'm getting married soon. I said, well, you spent all your days on top of a mountain. How come you met a woman that will accept your hard life? I said, yes, I found one. And she's actually very beautiful. And he told him, can I see her? And if she really confirms that she accepts you, I'll give you my blessings and more money. Then that shepherd showed him his wife to be. And guess what? The merchant immediately falls in love with the girl. And he told him, well, at this moment, I don't really trust that she accepts you. Maybe you are threatening her. So if you let me talk to her individually, maybe if she tells me that she wants you, I'll give you my blessing. Then he said, sure, you ask her. And then once he had an individual talk with her, he told her, why do you want to marry that dirty poor shepherd? Marry me instead. Do you see all that is around us? It belongs to me, my possession. I have a lot of money, piles of gold and silver. You name it, I have it. I told him, sure. If you want me to marry you, I'll do. Just in front of the shepherd. And that's what he did. And they made this commotion, they started fighting, then eventually they went to the judge. In the judge's court, they told him the story from the very beginning to the very end. And he requested to see the girl and ask her, and whoever she accepts, whoever she tells him that I want to marry that person, that's the decision. And once the judge sees the girl, of course, he falls in love. And he told her, why do you want that dirty shepherd? And why do you want that merchant? You need someone with power, and that rule the whole city. Marry me instead. She told him, of course, I will. Just inform the two others. And that's what he did. He told the two others, she does not want anything to do with you. She actually wants to marry me. Marry you, the shepherd said. That's not gonna happen. And then they started fighting and making this commotion in the judge's court. And they decided to go to the prime minister's court. They went there. The same story happened. The minister sees the girl. He falls in love. He told her, marry me. I am the prime minister. She said, well, they make this whole commotion. And then they go to the sultan. And of course, the sultan sees the girl. And he likes her. And then there is this big commotion between the sultan, the prime minister, the judge, the merchant, and the shepherd. The girl, the beautiful girl, was just looking beside them, looking at them and just smiling. And she told them, maybe I have a good solution for you. And then she told them, I want you to stand in a row. I'll draw a line, and on the count of 3, I'll be running. And whoever catches me first, I'll be his wife. And can you guess who was the most excited?
No.
All of them.
The shepherd. He was always after goats and on top of mountains, and he would catch them. He was in shape. The sultan wasn't. The minister wasn't. They were always sitting on the throne. So the shepherd was all excited, all energetic. He said, she's gonna be my wife. And then on the count of 3, all of them started running after that girl. She went out of the palace. They followed her. Through the city, they followed her, and the people started following her as well. You just see 5 people following a beautiful girl, and they just follow as well. They went outside of the country to a new one, and everyone in that new country followed her. For 1 year, for a couple of years, for 100 years, for 1,000 years, until now, no one could catch the girl. And actually, you and I, Baba C, we're all running after that girl. Can you guess who's that girl? I wouldn't put me in a spot like that. And I heard the story before and I forgot. It was. I got it. I was stalling. It's what Baba C does. It was like in that game, Life. Yes. See, that's life. And the biggest lesson from this story is that all of us are running after life, but we will never catch it because life is always ahead of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Julia. Well, and that is the end of our program tonight. I must just tell you what's coming up. This is UK times, not Moroccan times. Add on an hour for Moroccan times. Take off, I don't know, 5 hours depending on where you are in the USA.
I'm finally here.
But you're here, so I don't have to do
here,
your.
no.
But I'm talking about all that crowd over there.
Yes.
And the people that
Those people.
those people,
Yes.
those people. And so at 10 o'clock UK time tomorrow morning, we've got Ace Innovation, which is an Indian and Far Eastern organization, and they're putting on a store on Zoom. You can come on Zoom. You can come on live and just watch them on the various platforms. And they're putting on live a program from India of tribal storytelling and songs from India. And it's the first time anything like that's been done. It's a bit of a coup for the cafe and a coup for them. Because they're part of the Marrakesh International Storytelling Festival. And in the evening, depending on where you are, but 4:30 UK time, 5:30 Moroccan time, 8 p.m. is our Young International Summer. And that will be on a even more basic, not even more, this is advanced technology that we are getting used to here, but we are going to go back to our basic technology because we're going to do it live and direct from Henna Cafe. All right. Where the young classes take place. So, and there's loads more. We'll see the Americans again because there's going to be on Saturday night. There's going to be another hybrid again elsewhere from one of the Riyads, and that's an Irish American. Well, are there any Irish here? Come here, Irish.
I like the Americans.
The shy Irish girl you hear them all saying in the back.
So you'll see Maria on Zoomland on Saturday night. We're just going to have a party at the Rio, and in fact, and then on Sunday night, at the end of the festival, by then it's the last day of the festival. We've got the worldwide story round, so everyone who didn't out there in Zoomland that didn't get a chance to tell will get a chance to tell on Sunday evening. So you can all be, wherever you are in the world, you can be part of the 1, 2, 3, and it's going to be Marrakesh International Storytelling Festival 2022. You know this by now. So you're going to be part of the Marrakesh International Storytelling Festival 2022. Thank you, Ali. For driving the magic carpet as always.
And I have to remember not to get up at 11. Because of the time difference.
I love it. I love
Oh, David's trying to say something.
You know how it works.
Yeah.
Human being eating comes.
Oh, man.
Are you eating
But we're doing something at 2 o'clock tomorrow morning.
We don't have to be, there is something going on.
John, I think David wants to say something.
Okay, David.
Hello.
Hello, David, over there in England. It's glad to see you. We've got to close up because we've got to go downstairs. There's another program about to start, which is the Moroccan evening. So, bye, everybody. And hello, David, and goodbye. Thank you.
He gonna be upset with you, but he gonna- I think he gonna be upset with you, but he'll